Hi there and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelos in Ottawa. Tonight on this Tuesday, Policy Palooza on campaign day 3.
We will deliver an unprecedented acceleration of investment in our armed forces.
We will protect these programs and no one who has them will lose them.
Mark Carney lays out his defense policy and Pierre Poilievre details what social programs he won't cut, while sliding polls place Jagmeet Singh on the defense.
I'm never going to give up. I've faced challenges like that my whole life. I've never backed down. I never give up.
We've got reporters following the leaders in moments with behind-the-scenes analysis from the campaign trail. Then, top pollsters will be here to break down the data behind the razor-thin public opinion race between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. Plus, our front bench on a foreign interference allegation in Pierre Poilievre's 2022 Tory leadership race, the surprise re-entry of former Liberal Minister Sean Fraser, and more. That's coming up just a bit later on in the show. First, though,
My government is building, arming, and investing in the Canadian Armed Forces. My government is stepping up and fighting for Canada.
A new Conservative government will put Canada first by taking GST, the federal sales tax, off of all homes under $1.3 million.
People need us. They need New Democrats. So if you believe that we should fight back against the corporate greed in housing and grocery stores that is jacking up the prices in your life, vote NDP.
it's been a big day on the campaign trail with leaders still fanned out largely across eastern and central Canada. Liberal leader Mark Carney with stops in and around Halifax before heading to Windsor, Ontario. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre again in the greater Toronto area. Jagmeet Singh also in Toronto and Hamilton, while the Bloc and Greens stuck around in Quebec. We're going to start this evening on the Conservative campaign. Some big policy announcements from leader Pierre Poilievre. He started off updating his promise to remove the GST from many new homes before the campaign launched. He said a Conservative government would remove the GST from new homes under $1 million. He's now upped that cap to $1.3 million. He also gave some long-awaited answers on key social programs, saying a Conservative government would keep dental care for people who have it and honor federal child care agreements with provinces, while also promising to make that program more flexible.
We will protect these programs and no one who has them will lose them. We will make sure that nobody loses their dental care. We will also, on child care, we all believe that there should be more affordable child care in this country. While honoring the agreements on child care with the provinces, we're going to give more freedom and flexibility to parents, providers, and provinces to support the child care of all the kids.
Our Mike Lecouture is following the Tory campaign. He's with us live tonight from Hamilton. Mike, all of that happened, but what really dominated is my next guest, Bob Fife from The Globe, who's in studio with me. His story early on in the morning that we later confirmed about allegations in the Poilievre leadership race, of interference, I should say. Detail for us the reaction on the trail and kind of what your sense is behind the scenes of how the Tories are dealing with this.
Yeah, it's interesting, Vashi, because Pierre Poilievre was quick out of the gate. He knew this was coming, obviously, having read the Globe and Mail likely early on in Bob Fife's story, but certainly right away deflecting and essentially saying that, look, I had security clearance when I was a minister under Stephen Harper about 10 years ago. Now, security experts that we've spoken to said that could have expired at this point, so it's not exactly clear why he doesn't continue to renew that type of security clearance and to get that type of information. And as you had mentioned, the reporting that we had and the reporting that they had in the Globe talking about how it didn't affect the outcome of the actual leadership race. However, that still hangs over him because that question was asked, why isn't he getting that security clearance? And he continues to say that he feels he would be muzzled by it, that he wouldn't be able to question the government and he wouldn't be able to ask tough questions about some of those key things. Now, important again to note that we have spoken to security experts who said that's not the case, that if he did if he was able to take a look at this. And they used the example of Michael Chong when the issues of foreign interference were about him. He was briefed by the National Security Advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Jody Thomas, and he was able to still ask questions about it. So Pierre Poilievre continues to say that he will not take that security clearance, but it's something that if he does become Prime Minister, Vash, he will have to get it. He obviously won't have to ask any questions about it because he won't be in opposition, and that's certainly what the people behind me here at this rally are hoping. But that is something that will continue to dog Pierre Poilievre as he takes his tour across the country.
Okay, Mike, thanks so much. Look forward to your reporting as you follow the Conservatives over to the NDP's campaign. The leader of that party, Jagmeet Singh, didn't announce any new policy today and was on the defensive, facing questions about his party's continued slump in public opinion polling. Take a listen.
Every election, this is a question that New Democrats get, so it's not like a new thing. Every election we get this question. And if people are wondering, will I give up on someone like Aaron? Will I give up on fighting for people that need me to fight for them? No. Hell no. I'm never going to give up. I don't care what's going on. I'm always going to be there to fight for people.
Our own Rachel Aiello asked that question of the leader this morning. Rachel, how's the NDP managing this growing narrative of a party that, according to public opinion polls, are in dire straits?
Hey, Vashi. So today, it is the second full day of the federal election campaign, and yet NDP leader Jagmeet Singh made no substantive policy announcement. Instead, he met with a renter at a local bookstore, trying once again to link Liberal leader Mark Carney to his former firm Brookfield and their management of asset properties in this area. Now, this is of note because recent polling is showing the NDP could be in single-digit territory at the outcome of this election. Piling onto that, former NDP leader Tom Mulcair, in a column on ctvnews.ca, declared this race essentially a two-way fight between the Liberals and Conservatives, predicting that the NDP are essentially going to be squeezed out. So Jagmeet Singh faced a series of questions about this and the uphill battle that his party is facing in the polls right now. They are in a position, Vashi, where they could potentially lose official party status. They came into this election with 24 seats. 12 seats is what you need to be considered an official party in the House of Commons. And Singh acknowledged the massive challenges ahead for his party, but said that he's not going to give up. Singh was clear that the NDP faced questions like this in every campaign, but in the last two campaigns he led, the party ended up in around the same spot that they are now. So a lot of questions will be ahead for the NDP, whether they can turn this around, find some momentum, or whether this approach he's taken of trying to target Mark Carney and the Liberals could end up actually helping the Conservatives in such a tight race. That was also something Mulcair got at in his column, suggesting that essentially the NDP should take a mulligan and let the progressive voters move to the Liberals, which is something obviously Singh was trying to avoid today, making this announcement in Toronto Centre within the Village, specifically trying to appeal to progressive voters to say that they are still the only party fighting for them. So we'll see where things go from here with the NDP in terms of being able to stick that messaging and appeal to more voters. But as of now, with a series of other campaign events today, later into the evening, it's looking pretty much like a campaign, frankly, Vashi, a bit on autopilot. They are doing a few stops a day. Yesterday we had that big drive down the highway. So we'll see where things go if they're able to turn it around, but certainly not some easy questions for Jagmeet Singh today. And the state of their party remains in question, with pressure coming now from within the NDP. Vashi?
All right, thanks so much, Rachel. Rachel Aiello, following the NDP this week. Over to the Liberals, Mark Carney rolled out broad strokes of his defense policy that was short on specifics. Carney has committed to meeting the NATO commitment, or the NATO target, to spend 2% of GDP on defense by 2030, laying out plans to boost military salaries to help get there, as well as expand Navy capabilities with submarines, heavy icebreakers, offshore patrol ships, and river-class destroyers.
Defense spending has more than doubled in the last decade. But it's not enough for the new environment we're in. And that's why today I'm announcing my plan to rebuild, reinvest, and rearm. We will expand the capabilities of the Navy with new submarines and additional heavy icebreakers to defend the North.
So what's the Liberal leader saying or not saying about the specifics of his defense policy? CTV's Judy Trin is with us from the latest on the Liberals' campaign trail. Judy?
Vashi, Liberal leader Mark Carney outlined his party's new defense policy in front of a wall of workers responsible for building the next fleet of warships. The Liberals have yet to say how much their initiatives will cost, but the plan involves boosting domestic defense manufacturing, including the building of submarines and icebreakers to defend Canada's north. There are also plans to use drone, marine, and airborne vehicles, which will be used to surveil the Arctic. Now, Carney's proposal also includes increasing the salaries of military members and building them new housing and providing better health services. This is all to make joining the armed forces more appealing. The Department of National Defense says that the force has a shortage of approximately 14,500 soldiers. But the most important change may be Carney's promise to modernize the procurement process to speed up delivery of equipment, and specifically to favor Canadian suppliers and to prioritize Canadian steel and aluminum. Carney said he will modernize this process. Defense critics have said that successive governments have made similar promises but have failed to deliver because of the bureaucratic approvals that are necessary. Now, Carney also said that Canada, under a Liberal government, would commit to reaching the 2% NATO target by 2030. Vashi.
Thanks so much, Judy. Our Judy Trin on the trail with the Liberals this week. As Mike LeCouture mentioned, there is an Ottawa scoop generating a lot of questions today on the campaign trail. The Globe and Mail first reporting this morning on an allegation India, through proxies here in Canada, rallied support for Pierre Poilievre during the 2022 Conservative leadership race, something CTV News has also now confirmed. The Globe's Ottawa bureau chief, Robert Fife, broke the story. He's with us live here in studio. Hi, Bob. Good to see you. Let me ask you first, because the Conservatives are certainly saying this is a recycled story, that we knew this already. What is new about what you reported today and salient in your view?
Well, we knew back in June that the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians had said that there were two instances where China had interfered in a Conservative leadership convention, and an incident where it happened in the 2022 leadership convention with India. But what we never knew was, who was it? Was it Patrick Brown, or was it Pierre Poilievre, or was it somebody else? We now know that it was Mr. Poilievre that India was trying to help get elected. Nobody is suggesting that they had a huge impact on this, but the sources that I talked to said that that they had intelligence that Indian agents and their proxies had tried to raise money and support for Mr. Poilievre. He did not know about it. His inner circle did not know about it. But the question is, why didn't he want to know about it? You know, he has been asked for since June, why don't you have a national security clearance so you can find out who was behind this and make sure that they're not involved in the Conservative Party anymore? He's resisted doing that, and he's resisted doing it again today. He's got this argument that somehow he's going to get muzzled, or that they're going to use the information against him in the security clearance. None of that makes any sense, because this is specific information dealing with the Conservative Party, of which you are able to deal with, much the same way CSIS went to the Prime Minister in 2019 and told him about activities by China in the Don Valley North nomination. Mr. Trudeau chose not to act on that. Right. He now regrets it today, because the MP who represented that riding will not be allowed to run for them. Well,
and it's a good example to bring up, because I remember at the time all the hard questions we threw the Liberals and the Prime Minister's delegates about why you would have the prospect of something being wrong within your party and not want to get to the root of it and then root it out. It feels like the same questions are driving the relevancy of the line of accountability today to Mr. Poilievre.
Well, particularly because every other political leader in Parliament has got a national security clearance, so they can be briefed on foreign interference. And this is really important, because we now know, because of the inquiry into foreign interference, that it is a very serious threat to our democracy. In fact, we had senior officials out yesterday, including a deputy director of the CSIS, saying that China and India, Pakistan, and Iran are the principal actors, but it's mainly China and India. And they use diplomats and they use proxies in the communities to do disinformation and to organize again in favor of politicians that they hope will show more favor to them. And this is what's puzzling about Mr. Poilievre, because this is a serious issue. Take it seriously. And his argument that, that he doesn't trust the Liberal government. Well, the security clearance reviews are handled by CSIS and nonpartisan civil servants. The Prime Minister of the day or cabinet ministers or political staff do not get to see that, what's involved in the security check involving any of the opposition leaders. But the significant thing here is it's designed, including, if I may say so, Justice Hogue of the Public Inquiry also said all leaders should do this. Why? Because it's serious and you need to be informed. And if you're informed of what's going on in your party, you can deal with it.
I'm sure you put those questions to the Conservatives, and Mr. Poilievre spoke today. I just want to play his response. He was asked more generally for comment on the story, not the specifics of what you just laid out. Let's just play what he said in response.
Let's be honest. I won the leadership fair and square, but I'm glad that the Liberals put this attack out today. Really glad, because there's something that's really been worrying me. After Justin Trudeau named Mark Carney his economic advisor, giving him massive power over public policy in Canada, Mr. Carney went over for meetings in Beijing where he just had secret talks with the deputy governor of the Chinese central bank. 2 weeks later, Brookfield got a $250 million loan.
But just very quickly, I want to point out, we reached out to the Liberals to get a response to what Mr. Poilievre is talking about. All they responded was saying this is a desperate attempt by Pierre Poilievre to distract from the fact that he refuses to get his security clearance at a time of crisis for Canada. Whether it's not getting his security clearance or his friend Danielle Smith confirming he'd follow Donald Trump's playbook, Pierre Poilievre is the wrong choice at the wrong time. So they did not address the substance of anything he said there, but that is the response they provided us back to us. I just wanted to big picture ask you, Bob, as someone who's covered politics for a long time, when he originally took the stance against taking the security clearance back in June, the Conservatives were 20 or 25 points ahead of the Liberals. Pollsters I talked to today said, in general, people's sentiment around this issue was pretty baked in. Do you think the fact that those polls have narrowed so substantially means the interpretation among Canadians of what unfolded today could be any different?
Well, look, I don't think it looks very good on Mr. Poilievre. Particularly because there are growing threats around the world. China is much more aggressive. India has killed Canadians and committed other violent acts in this country. Why would you not want to have that kind of information? We don't even know what the Americans are going to be up to under Donald Trump. That's why an opposition leader having security clearance is really important. Here's another reason. During the election campaign, we're in what is called a caretaker convention. And so if there's a major terrorist threat or some kind of security threat to the country, the Prime Minister has an obligation to brief the political leaders, opposition leaders. All of the other ones have national security clearance. They can get briefed. Mr. Carney would not be able to brief Mr. Poilievre if there was an incident like that because he doesn't have a security clearance.
Unless he changed his posture.
Unless he changed his posture, which he hasn't been able to do. And on the China stuff, he's got some good points. Reporters are going to have to put that to Mr. Carney tomorrow.
And I'm sure they will, and we will. Thanks so much, Bob.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Robert Fife is the Ottawa bureau chief for the Globe and Mail. We're going to dig into the political stakes of that allegation against the 2022 Tory leadership race and a whole lot more on the campaign trail with our front bench a little bit later on in the show. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie will be here first. Though I just put to Bob that those polls are closing, and they're closing fast. We're going to talk to two pollsters about that swing, that wild swing that we've seen. Greg Lyle and David Coletto join me next. Stay right there.
We're defending our borders, our sovereignty, our minerals, our water, our land, our way of life.
We will stand up to the American president from a position of strength. More important than anything, we will bring home the Canadian promise.
Will I give up on fighting for people that need me to fight for them? No. Hell no. I'm never going to give up. I don't care what's going on. I'm always going to be there to fight for people.
The story of 2024 political polling was Justin Trudeau's collapse and Pierre Poilievre's rise, but those numbers are moving fast in the other direction, with the Liberals enjoying a rapid recovery in the polls following Justin Trudeau's departure, Mark Carney taking party reins, and the ascent of Donald Trump. With the Conservatives and Liberals now locked in a tight race, we've got top pollsters here to dig into public opinion data. David Coletto is the founder, chair, and CEO of Abacus Data, and Greg Lyle is the president of, and founder, rather, of Innovative Research Group. Hi to both of you. Thank you so much for making time for this conversation. David, we'll start with you and your top line numbers, which, boy, oh boy, if we had this conversation late last year, would look a whole lot different. How much of a swing are we talking about, in your view?
Well, we're talking about a massive swing in a very short period of time. Our most recent numbers still have the Conservatives ahead by 3, but with the Liberals at 36, they're up 16 points in just over 2 months. We're about to be done at a field that I think is going to show, for the first time in our tracking, the Liberals ahead. So that trend seems to be continuing. This isn't the Liberal peak, and they still seem to have some more room to grow, largely at the New Democrats' expense.
Greg, you already have the Liberals 2 points ahead, I believe, of the Conservatives in your most recent set of data. Where are you seeing the biggest gains being made? Like, who is swinging back to or from the NDP toward the Liberals?
I mean, the Liberals are gaining across the board. Regionally, they're doing best in Eastern Canada, where they're ahead now in the Atlantic, ahead in Quebec, and in our numbers, narrowly ahead in Ontario. Attitudinally is really interesting. We do a value cluster segmentation, and when we look at people that have the most left-wing values in Canada, the Liberals have twice as much support as the NDP. So the NDP's really fallen apart there. But on the other side of the equation, we see two types of Conservatives: a populist Conservative that's still very happy with Poilievre, but a deferential Conservative, more like a Brian Mulroney Conservative, where the Liberals are now ahead.
It's interesting. I wanted to pick up on that point because I can remember, how many conversations have all of us had over the past 5 or 6 years where there's like, do they have to pivot to the center? And there was a sort of rejection among Conservatives at this idea that they had to moderate because everyone's in the middle and there's this great class of voters to be one that ultimately can catapult a party to form government. It feels like progressive conservatism is alive and well with the polls in the past little while, David. Is that an incorrect conclusion to reach based on this?
Well, I don't know if it's so much an ideology or a partisanship. I think what people are looking for is stability. And so if progressive conservative values are about, keeping things in the straight and narrow, not changing too much, which is ironic given that people still are looking for a change, but I don't think they're looking for a revolution. They're not looking for more disruption to their lives. They just want to know that whoever's going to lead them is going to guide the country through this incredibly uncertain and difficult period. And so I think what you see is actually far less ideology. It's why Mark Carney can both be winning over past Conservative supporters. He's getting about 1 in 10 of those who voted Conservative last time now say they're going to vote Liberal, at the same time as he's attracting a quarter of those who voted NDP. Like, that is the ultimate, Liberal, if they have success, is being able to pull from both sides. And I think it's because Carney has really positioned himself as that moderate, stable, sensible alternative to the chaos that Donald Trump is throwing around the world.
Greg, when it comes to leadership attributes and the leader positioning itself, you have some new data out about best prime minister, for example. And again, if this had been a few months ago and we were looking at Pierre Poilievre versus Justin Trudeau, the numbers certainly didn't look the way that your data shows you the Carney-Poilievre face-off looks at this moment.
Right. If you look at favorables, Poilievre was 20 points ahead of Trudeau. Today, Carney is 20 points ahead of Poilievre. If we look at who's best to be prime minister, Carney has an 8-point lead. If we look at who's best to deal with the U.S., Carney has a 12-point lead. Part of the issue here, though, may be as much tone as ideology or policy. So I think one of the most effective bits of communications that the Liberals have out is an ad that shows Trump saying something in a certain way, and then Poilievre saying the same basic thing the same basic way, and they do it 3 or 4 times. And if the ballot question is who's best to stand up to Trump, the answer is probably not the person that sounds like him.
Does it feel, David, like that still remains the ballot question? I would point to the fact that over the past few days, it has felt for once like we are not in the crosshairs as directly as we had been over the last number of weeks in a sustained fashion. Does that make a difference ultimately, or is this in the back of our minds no matter what right now?
I think it's informing almost everything. I mean, we ask a question, what's most likely to decide how you're going to vote? Is it the party that best represents change, is going to be a change in direction and policy, or the party that's best going to deal with the effects that Trump's throwing at us? And a month ago, it was 56% I want change, 44% let's deal with Trump. And those numbers have now flipped in our most recent survey that we just finished like moments ago. And among those who say this is about Trump, the Liberals lead by like 30 points. And for those who say this is about change, the Conservatives lead by 35. I mean, it's rare to see such a perfect correlation between where you frame yourself and how you see this election and how you're going to vote. And so right now, the momentum is still moving into that Trump. This is about Trump. This is about stability. This is about certainty. It's still, there's still lots of people who say, and it's still the number one issue, that the cost of living is there. And that's why I think Mark Carney has tried to put out some tax cuts and demonstrate that he's still aware of it. But he still has that massive advantage on the Trump question, which I think is why the Liberals find themselves now really in pole position and the favorites to win this election if it were to end, today.
Last word to you, Greg. Most of the time, what goes up has to come down. Do you have a gut feeling based on the surveying you're doing about whether this ascent we've witnessed over the last 8 weeks for the Liberals is, not yet at a peak or past its peak?
Well, they still have room to grow, but there are 2 events that are very likely to determine how this election ends up. The bigger one of the 2 is the April 2nd tariff deadline. 2 different sets of tariffs are going to be dealt with on that day. And if a significant number of tariffs are imposed on Canada, 4 weeks later on Election Day, there'll be a significant number of Canadians out of work. And that is going to fundamentally change the dynamic. Whether the Liberals benefit or not, we don't know. And then the second thing is the 2 debates. In the leadership, Carney struggled. He stumbled in French, misstated himself, and he didn't do a good job on the Brookfield issue in English. He's going to be up against 3 pit bulls, and how he comes out of that could be deterministic.
Great point. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much to both of you for the analysis this evening, Greg Lyle and David Coletto. There is a lot more to come on Power Play after a very short break. The front bench will be here to dig into all that's unfolding. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. There they are. They're with me in just 2 minutes. Stay tuned.
We are building for the long term. We're building Canada strong, not for an election cycle, but to protect Canadians. We're building for the long term.
We will make sure that nobody loses their dental care. We will also, on child care, we all believe that there should be more affordable child care in this country.
The question is if I'm assured that Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative, is not going to cut. No, he is going to cut. He voted against dental care. He voted against pharmacare.
As you can hear there, campaign day 3 has really delivered a lot for us to talk about. Mark Carney has an uncosted defense policy and is still on the defensive for backing out of a French language debate. Pierre Poilievre has decided to keep Liberal dental care and child care agreements and is facing questions on a new report alleging India interfered in his leadership election. And Jagmeet Singh is fighting potentially disastrous public opinion polls. Plus, former Housing Minister Sean Fraser has changed his mind about leaving federal politics, announcing he will run again in Nova Scotia. It all calls for nobody else but the front bench. With me tonight, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt is here. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is here, as is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody. Great to see you.
Hey, Bessie.
Benzie, I'll start with you because you know as well as anyone, best laid plans on a campaign, lots of substantive announcements today, but the dominating story was certainly that from the Globe around allegations that it was India that allegedly interfered in the 2022 leadership race, aiming to benefit Pierre Poilievre. He was not aware, his inner circle not aware. There's no conclusion that it impacted the race. In fact, nobody is alleging that it could have because of the decisive nature of his win. But still, that's what the question was about, and certainly a lot of fodder on the campaign trail. Your take on whether that matters in this campaign, and if so, or if not, why not?
I think it matters in the sense, Vashi, that any time you're not talking about what you want to talk about, it's probably not great on the campaign trail. Mr. Poilievre wanted to be talking about his axe the GST on houses that cost less than $1.3 million. It's a good news announcement for his party and he'd rather be talking about that than about Bob Fife and Steve Chase's story about whether the Indian government helped him win the Tory leadership. Now, I don't think he was wrong when he said this morning that he won fair and square. He won 70% of the vote. So Narendra Modi didn't swing the election, the leadership election for Mr. Poilievre. But it reminded me of why it was problematic for him not to get a security briefing. My colleague Mark Ramsey asked him about that on Sunday, and he gave a pretty glib answer, I thought, at his launch, saying how, you know what, that's a politicized process. I don't think that it is a politicized process. And stories like this are really, really damaging when you refuse to get your security briefing. When Carney it gives Carney an out on the Brookfield stuff, because he can say, yeah, I put my stuff in a blind trust, and oh, by the way, I got my security briefing, just like Pierre Poilievre hasn't.
So I want to ask you, Tom, about that, because if there's one person the Tories keep pointing me to in defense of their decision, it's you, and comments that you made, I think, to my colleague Marcia a number of months ago, kind of, understanding the posture Mr. Poilievre had taken at the time. Do you think the position is as tenable today as it was then?
I made the same comments to your colleague Todd this afternoon on CTV News Channel. I agree completely with Pierre Poilievre on this. I believe he is completely right. You do not accept to play this mugs game where you restrain your ambit and your ability to act as leader of the official opposition, which is a constitutional role to hold the government to account. And this game where you have people in the hierarchy of the security establishment saying, oh, he really should come in, but then he's not allowed to talk about it anymore. Really? Didn't we just have a commission of inquiry headed up by Madame Justice Hogue, who put all of this stuff away and said there might have been a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but all of a sudden we're talking about whether Poilievre actually got the 68%. What, maybe it was 67%? I mean, this is madness, to try to make this an issue in a campaign that is so serious for the country, to try to go back to this stuff and to try to complain about Poilievre wanting to do his constitutional duty. He wants to do his job of holding the government to account, and no, he's not going to walk into that bear trap that consists of getting a security clearance, seeing documents that could be important, and not talking about it. By the way, when I was leader of the opposition, Vashi, a certain Stephen Harper would call me personally. His staff would give me a setup, called me once during a wedding reception and said, I've got to talk to you. And it was Harper himself saying, look, there's this and this and this that's going to roll out in the next few days. It's going to be in the news. I want you to know about it. That's what a prime minister does with his or her leader of the opposition. You talk. Nobody had to make me swear any oath. I was still the leader of the opposition, but I had no intention of going in front of a camera and talking about it. This bit about Poilievre somehow not being up to snuff. When Carney went down that road today, I think he made a big mistake. He's been on the high road all along. He's got these tyros around him who keep saying, oh, use this bit of dirt, use that bit of dirt. Really? So all of a sudden, what did he get snapped right back at him by Poilievre? Oh, let's talk about when you were in Beijing, talking with the Chinese Communist Party, borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars for your private company. It has nothing to do with this campaign any more than the bit about supposed Indian government interference. It's the tricks that they use on each other. What the Liberals learned today is that Poilievre's very good at this game, and they better choose their subject a little bit more carefully next time, because they didn't score any points today, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, let me ask from a political perspective, because Lisa's nodding, so I think she agrees with the substance of what you're saying. Is there a way for Poilievre to take that posture on taking the actual briefing, but also express desire to know if there was rot in the leadership process, if there are foreign agents working against the interests of Canadians in that leadership phase? Like, could he acknowledge it and say, I would like to get to the bottom of it, just not vis-a-vis the way that the government has spelled out?
Is that for me or for Tom?
That's for Lisa. For Lisa.
He did that. And he did that by using a convention that a lot of leaders do, which is your chief of staff is briefed. Ian Todd had the information. He understood, he knows, he saw the documents. And as a result, you rely upon your chief of staff to make sure that they tell the boss what needs to be told, and they can keep their eyes and ears on what's important. Clearly, that's what happened in this case. I agree with what Tom said. I don't think I could say it any better. But I would lean on one point in particular. Is this really what we're going to discuss at this point in time? Greg Lyle just told us that if these tariffs go in place, there are going to be people unemployed on April 28th. Isn't that the discussion we should be having in the country? And if these parties are going to continue to snipe at each other about trying to throw dirt on who is closer to India or who is closer to China, no one is anything but patriotic in this race. Everybody loves our country. We will fight for our country. And we're sniping at each other on something that honestly is so ridiculous. They should really focus on what matters to Canadians, and that's our safety and our prosperity going forward.
My guess about why this becomes something to talk about is because, Brian, it is, on either side going to be leading to questions around leadership. And when you are this close in the polls, and a lot of the policies you're proposing are not as discernibly different as they might have been 2 or 3 years ago, politicians or their operatives are going to use this to inform a view of leadership. Is my guess is why I understand Lisa's point that there's a lot of heavy stuff going down, but why this stuff is also, dominating some discussion today.
Yeah, for sure. I have so much to say. I think such great contributions by all three. I think Benzie's point is a really good one. While I was watching the sort of the clips that set up our talk here, I was literally thinking to myself, none of them are getting through with the message they proactively wanted to, and Benzie pointed that out, so I couldn't agree more. And on this topic, certainly that's the case for Poilievre, but to some extent it's the case for Carney as well. I mean, we're talking about this, and look, I think Tom's right in the sense that I don't believe it's any sort of big issue. Politically speaking, it might have been a net neutral, net gain, maybe even, if Poilievre would have gotten the clearance, just from a political point of view. But I do agree with Tom in the sense that, look, this was set up with the idea that come see what really happened or what we've been told, and then you'll basically stop criticizing, or you'll almost have to, because you'll have that information, right? So it definitely was set up with that frame to be fair to Poilievre and the Conservatives. But at the same time, he easily could have said, okay, fine, I only want to know, this little section of what's going on because that would be what's relevant to me, or whatever. I mean, there could have been a way perhaps for him to be able to sort of get this out of the window so they can't use it. And to Lisa's point, I mean, I agree. Listen, this is not sort of what I think is top of mind for Canadians right now. It's important. Interference was a story that lasted a long time because it's important as well. But this particular chapter, I don't think is quite important or not comparable to what we should be focused on. But to be fair, again, look, at the same time, you can say the exact same thing about Carney and his assets. I mean, is that really the guy followed the rules? Is that really what should be thrown at him, given the circumstances that we find ourselves in, right? So look, I think, to your preamble, they're going to throw stuff like this at each other, yes, for leadership, but also, going back to Rob's point, probably just so the cycle isn't a great cycle for the other party, right? I think it's also a little bit of that going on, just try to thwart and mitigate any proactive message the other side might have on a given day.
Okay, the cycle continues here. We're going to take a quick break. The front bench is back after that break. We've got lots more to unpack about what's unfolding on the campaign trail. Back in a moment.
Every election, this is a question that New Democrats get, so it's not like a new thing. Every election we get this question. And if people are wondering, will I give up on someone like Aaron? Will I give up on fighting for people that need me to fight for them? No, hell no. I'm never going to give up. I don't care what's going on. I'm always going to be there to fight for people.
Jagmeet Singh on the campaign trail today, responding to questions from reporters about the NDP's kind of fall from grace when it comes to public opinion polling and the numbers that they've lost over the last week that largely have been to the advantage of the Liberals. I'm here with our front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Tom, the question was initially posed based actually on the piece you wrote for our website that essentially said because of the risk Trump poses and the threat of Trump, it is a two-way race. Why do you believe that's the case? Is there any way up the middle for the NDP, for example?
Going to be very hard because both parties are trying to straddle the middle right now. The main ones, in other words, Carney is saying to Canadians, that's where I am. And he's pulling the Liberals a little bit to the right from the Trudeau years. Poilievre is trying to put a little bit of water in his wine. He's saying that he's going to maintain social programs and he's going to provide a $15 billion tax cut. Not saying how he's going to pay for it, but everybody is playing the same game right now. The stakes are that high. This is a time of real crisis for Canada's very existence. And that existential threat from Trump, from the United States, is making those two parties, the only ones who can possibly form government, the only games in town. Now, I used to live the frustration of being an NDP leader and hear Liberals talk about, oh, strategic voting, don't split the vote, as if the vote belonged of right to the Liberals. It used to drive me nuts. But this time, nobody has to make that plea. Voters are doing it on their own. In Quebec, the bloc is dropping like a rock in water, or at least it was until yesterday's brilliant decision, and we'll get to it to stay out of the debate there. But with regard to the very fact that we're looking at right now, the NDP in single digits in most of the polling. In Quebec, down to 6%, where we won 59 seats a few years back with Jack. So even in the 15 election that we lost, we kept a dozen seats in Quebec. So this is a time in the cycle of the life of the NDP that they've been through before. It happened to Alexa McDonough, who was an outstanding leader, and Jagmeet Singh's a great leader. He's a very strong leader. He's a warrior, and he's got all the lines, and he's pushing his stuff very hard. But Canadians are saying, sorry, we're on the progressive side, and whether you're a Green or an NDPer, you're looking at this, and we were just listening to the polling before we went on air. The number of, the more progressive conservative types, the Doug Ford conservatives, they're moving over to Carney. Vashi, in the past week, I've spoken to senior NDPers, especially in the West, who are simply working for and planning to vote for Mark Carney and the Liberals because they sense the existential threat. They find that Pierre Poilievre is too easily identified with the ideas of Trump, rightly or wrongly, but that's the perception, and they plan to vote for the Liberals. And that's why the numbers for the Liberals are being, doped up right now.
Why do you think that the NDP is certainly trying to frame, Lisa, the two other options as conservative options. Why is that not landing with progressive voters right now?
I think it's fair. Tom's really tapped into it. It's going to be a binary choice at the ballot box. Are they going to go for option A or are they going to go for option B? And the NDP aren't necessarily making the cut. There are going to be some ridings, though, where the NDP are going to win on the basis of incumbency. But that's the other problem. There are some strong incumbents who are not running this time. The Standard Bearers, the Charlie Anguses, the Carol Hughes, they're not running again. And as a result, there's going to be some softness in their ridings as well. So, Jagmeet Singh has a big hurdle, not only in terms of trying to get attention, but as well saving the seats so that he actually can become an official party status still. And that's a big deal.
You know who is running again, Benzie? Sean Fraser, a few months ago, more family time. As I joked to you at the time, don't believe anyone who's been married a long time when they say they want to spend more time with their spouse. Turns out he didn't. He's now running again. Is this just, hey, I thought I wouldn't win and now I will?
I don't want to be too cynical about these things, Vashi, but we had Anita Anand, we had him, and then I guess when Nate Erskine-Smith got in cabinet, when Trudeau was still prime minister, he decided he would be sticking around. Right. It's politicians are they read the tea leaves, and I guess it's a very good sign for Mr. Carney that Mr. Fraser feels that it's safe to come back. I think I watched Carney. And he wasn't reading a teleprompter when he was talking about the bringing Fraser back. And he looked so confident, I thought, in this Nova Scotia appearance earlier today. And I also noticed something, and this is a pretty subtle thing, Vashi, but Carney's podium now says protecting Canada. That is basically a plagiarism of Doug Ford's re-election campaign in Ontario last month, which was Protect Ontario. I know that Mr. Carney has studied Mr. Ford's playbook. Now he's like lifting the actual phraseology from it. And I think that's probably smart, given what our friend Corey Tenaik, who helped get Mr. Ford reelected last month, was saying on a podcast this morning, where he talked about how he didn't think the strong Canada First for a change was a very good slogan for the Conservatives. So the branding and the vibe tells you that the Liberals feel very confident. But, you know, there's a lot of time between now and Election Day.
And there are those two debates. There was going to be a third one, Brian. Last word to you on this. I'm unfortunately running out of time. But TVA hosted last time a face-to-face debate. They asked the parties to pay into it. Everyone agreed. Mark Carney yesterday said, why not? Then later in the day, party said, I'm not participating. The debate was canceled. Today he said it was because Elizabeth May wasn't invited. Your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure that's the reason, or maybe it's one of the considerations, I suppose. But really, look, I think it's fair for them to say, we're going to do the commission debates. There's an English and there's a French debate. And where Mark Carney stands in the polls, coupled with he does not have even close to the political experience that Poilievre has, especially at debating. I certainly understand the political strategy behind saying, let's do the commission debates. On Sean Fraser, I think we have to be fair to the guy, though. Think about the day that he announced he resigned. Later that day, Freeland resigned, and the whole political landscape in Canada just, sort of completely changed within minutes. So certainly give the guy a break on that. And on the NDP stuff, I have to say, so Tom, sorry, I'm certainly one of the people that made the argument to not split the vote during an election. But to tell the story from the other side, it is sometimes difficult when you go in a coffee shop, which happened to me, and say, well, we're voting for a so-called third party. And I said, well, we may not form government if you do that. He said, oh, you'll just form government with the so-called third party. And that didn't end up happening, and somebody else formed the government. So it's telling you the other side of the story, Tom.
Cuts
that can be
both
frustrating
ways.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Thanks, everyone. Great to see you. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie, our front bench. We're back in just a moment. You're on Power Play. Welcome back to Power Play. A quick recap of where things stand for the parties ahead of the next few days. We're on day 3 of a 37-day campaign. Sean Fraser, former Minister of Immigration and Housing, 2 heavily scrutinized files for the Liberal government, is back in after saying in December he wasn't going to run again. He is now running in Nova Scotia. The Liberals announced their defense policy. They'll hit NATO targets, Mark Carney says, by 2030. The Conservatives announced removing the GST from new homes. Instead of under $1 million, they've upped that cap now during the campaign to $1.3 million. We expect a lot more affordability announcements over the next few days. I'm going to leave our program, Power Play, there. I'm Vashi Capellos. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your night.